after me. Take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Palms down. Good morning, everybody. We got a nice spot in the sun over there. That's pretty good. I need sunglasses. Good to see everybody. You know, you get so many questions here and throughout the week and different times. There's this, to me, my perception is just there's this constant overcomplicating Buddhist practice. And, you know, we have different schools, we have different lineages, we have different cultures, we have different languages. And on top of all of that, we have 2,500 years of history where everybody is making up what they think is correct. So good luck figuring out what all that is about. Right? And then you have one person who lived 2,500 years ago named Siddhartha Gautama, who they called the Buddha. He taught for 45 years and he died. And so for the last 2,500 years, everybody's just been making up what they think the Buddha said. Right? And that, in essence, is why I think one of the reasons it's so confusing for people who are brand new. And I often, if not always, like to remind people that, as my master used to say, think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. That is the simplest way to explain Buddhist teachings, in my view. And it also is the deepest, most profound Buddhist teaching, because it's so difficult. Right? How many of you did nothing but think good thoughts this morning? I saw one hand, nice work. How many of you did nothing but speak good words all day today? I mean, it's only 11 o'clock. So yeah, I went up to 3 hands. We're getting better. Right? And then do good deeds. I mean, maybe you just rolled out of bed and showed up here, so far you're all right. But that's the essence of it. Think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. And that's what I remind myself every single day. It doesn't matter how many books you read, how many different ways you explore Buddhist teachings, how many different schools of Buddhism you look at, or cultures of Buddhism you think it's from. You know, Travis and I always tease each other about different schools of Buddhism, but ultimately it comes down to what I just said. Think good thoughts, speak good words, do good deeds. And that will take you most likely, and I'm being generous here, a lifetime to work on. Just one lifetime. So if you just work on that the rest of your life, you will understand the depth of the Buddhist teachings. And if you work on that every day very diligently, as the Buddha said before he died, strive on with diligence, that's the last teaching he gave, you'll understand, to me at least, when I hear that teaching, what he meant was this isn't easy. Right? It takes a lot of practice. And And so that's why we come together as a community, as a Sangha, to look at what we all think the Buddha taught and explore different ways to integrate these teachings into our lives. So for those who are brand new, try not to complicate Buddhism as you begin. And for those who've been at this for 50 years, try not to complicate Buddhism as you begin. So with that, we'll start with the meditation practice. A couple things to tell you before we begin. For those who are maybe sitting for the first time, nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences, most likely. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working, is this not working, am I doing it right, am I doing it wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds. People cough, phones ring, doors open and close. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. The practice of meditation is learning to get quiet and still within all the chaos, not escaping from it. And if you do cough, please just sit there and cough comfortably. Don't feel bad for coughing. Don't try to hold in your cough. Don't go outside and cough because we can hear you just as loud out there. Just cough. If anything, you woke somebody up, so thank you very much. I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. And again, most important with the practice, don't expect anything. If you're sitting there waiting for some grand aha moments, you're going to be waiting a long time and probably be really disappointed. So I'll guide us as we begin. We'll settle into a little bit of silence. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you're on the cushions, often it helps sliding into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. Hands can be on the knees or in the lap. If you're on the chairs or the benches, also just trying to sit up straight. You want to be comfortable, but don't get lazy with posture. Try to stay upright. I'll guide us as we begin. And we'll settle into a little bit of silence. Starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth open or closed. Start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. Settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Going throughout the practice, you'll hear sound. These are not distractions, not disruptions. It's simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Gently guide the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Where's your mind? Lost in thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. expectation. Letting go of judgment from the practice. Just sitting, breathing. Keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Get concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. bodies still, rested. And the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. And the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. No one else to be. Everything beautiful, just as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly begin to move. The most important, the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, it's quiet, calm, still, or a busy mind, racing mind. Whatever you're sitting with at this moment has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakening. He was a human being, no different than anyone in this room, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for every one of us in this room, regardless of where we come from, what we believe in, where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's what you get every day. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most people in this room, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. So all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. It's not necessarily fun, but it's free. Meditation, Buddhist practice is sitting, breathing, learning to become aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do. And that's it. You know, we spend so much of our time trying to figure things out. Well, if only I understood this, if I understood that, if they would do this, if they would do that. Why do they do this? Why do they do that? So much time trying to understand so many things. Thinking that if we gain or acquire more knowledge, that all of a sudden that's going to mean something to us. This practice is getting to know yourself. What you think, what you say, and what you do. And that's why it's so difficult. This practice isn't for everybody. This practice isn't an escape. Often we turn to meditation or Buddhist practice to run away from other things in our lives. Now, as I always say, turning to meditation and Buddhist practice is probably healthier than many things, I'm sure none of you in this room, but many things we might turn to escape from the chaos in our heads. But this isn't running from it, it's actually waking up to it. It's learning to be with the madness that's in your head and sit with it. And that's why it's difficult. To me, this practice has always been holding up a mirror, reflecting back on yourself. What that means is you're starting over every single day. Every single day, you're getting to know what you think, what you say, and what you do. You don't win. You don't get to go to the next level. You don't get any prizes for having some grand, deep understanding of Buddhism. You get the beauty of getting to know why you do what you do. And that's it. So, I'd rather just stop there. Open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything that's on your mind that I can address.
In the beginning, each week you say it's thoughts, words, and deeds. What makes Buddhism different from Judaism then, or Christianity? You could boil them all down to those three things, right? You've got 613 of this, you've got all this. There's quite a bit of lists here too, the Four Truths, the Eightfold Path, all these lists. So what makes Buddhism different than the other religions? When I tell people about this place, I can tell their hesitancy. I says, there's no robes and tambourines, it's just, you know, a regular place. And,
Robes and tambourines are at 2 o'clock.
So it's just, it is that simple, but yet it's not.
Yeah.
It's more of an observation than a question.
For sure.
But what makes this Buddhism
Yeah.
different than the people, the different kinds?
You're asking what I'm hearing to be kind of two different questions, two different points you're bringing up. One, which is, as you said, what makes this different, Buddhism different from, say, Christianity or Judaism. And the second thing you're bringing up, which you touched on briefly, but it's only because I've known you for a while now. The second part is, when you mention it to others, you find yourself falling into this deep rabbit hole of not knowing how to explain it. So let me address the first part. Is that fair? Yeah? The first part. What makes this different from Christianity and Judaism? Probably nothing. I'd have to have some in-depth knowledge of Christianity or Judaism to be able to respond to that. Neither of those I have. As a Jewish kid, I didn't pay attention so much, so I can't touch on that. And as a Jewish kid, I didn't learn about Christianity. But what I can tell you is that I'm pretty sure from the bits and pieces I've learned over the years, and even a month ago doing a talk at the Christian church down the street, addressing Living Buddha, Living Christ, and myself as a Jewish kid turned Buddhist sitting with a retired reverend, and we addressed Christianity and Buddhism to a room full of probably 50 Christians. And I don't know, everything that they said Christianity meant to them and what it did for them and how it made them feel sounded very Buddhist to me. So everything I've learned in Judaism and everything at all, I think the world's great leaders over many years have shared the same message. So I don't personally get wrapped up, and this ties into the second part of your question. When someone asks about it, or you try to explain it, it is almost impossible, and this is probably, I'm guessing, a challenge you have. We often find ourselves in a situation where we're trying to compare it, or draw a parallel, or explain why this is okay versus that. And I don't ever get into those dialogues. I don't try to explain what this is. I don't try to, and I'm just elaborating here, not specifically to you, but I don't try to convince people why this might be beneficial, right? I do the practice, it helps my life. I share it to those who show up. When you speak about Buddhism and you're newer to it, the last few years, and you get into a dialogue with people who are not Buddhist and you're trying to explain it, you're done. You can't, right? I suggest abort mission as much as possible and remove yourself from that dialogue. Because all it's going to do, actually, in many cases, not necessarily you, but in many cases, then one sits there and they get frustrated. Right? Because you come here, on and off, week after week after week for a few years, and you feel pleasant when you're here. And you like it, and it's doing something for you. Who knows what, but it's doing something for you. And then you try to explain it to people. And very often, that brings up frustration. Well, they're not listening to me. They don't understand. And then all of a sudden, you're doing the opposite of everything you're actually learning here to begin with, which is to just be with the practice in your life and how it impacts your life. And a simple answer is, I go to this Buddhism class or this Buddhist temple, this meditation. Why? What does it do? It helps me be calm. It helps me open my heart. It helps me open my mind. It helps me get closer to understanding whatever this truth may be. Whatever those words are for you, and then leave it at that. That's my suggestion. Once you try to, explain it, you're done. But, it's funny this morning, it's ironic you asked that question because, when I stop and then I often will say some things and I decided not to and just open up to questions right away. But I was coming back this morning and I saw 3 people walking outside with almost looked like clipboards, sheets of paper. I saw them that way and I wasn't sure what they were doing. And I walked out when I came back and I saw them walking up the steps. And it was just this feeling I had. I didn't know what it was. And I said, they were inside looking at the schedule on the wall there. And I said good morning to them and I said, how are you? I said, can I help you? It was that first time here look on their face, which is pretty obvious, right? And I said, can I help you? And they said, well, we're here to pray for the Board of Education building across the street. And I said, yeah, they need a lot of prayers, right? And they said, can we pray for you? I said, I'm okay. There's probably people out there who need more prayers than I do. I said, I got everything I need. You know, they said, well, what is this place? I said, it's a Buddhist temple. And the first thing they said was, well, we're glad you left the cross up. I said, me too. You know, one is, welded in there pretty good. Tough to take down. I've been up there, it's not so easy. And I said, and I could tell that, you can all make up in your minds what that dialogue was like, and I can make up in my mind what that dialogue was like. And I said, they said, who are you? And I said, we're a Buddhist temple, and I explained the Dharma bums, and I, downtown for 10 years and here for 2. And I said, without Emanuel Swedenborg, a Christian mystic who built this, he's from the 1700s, and he built this place in 1927, none of us would be here right now. That's what I said to them. I said, so we see 500 to 700 people a week to this place, and if it weren't for Christian mystics, this wouldn't exist. So we have endless appreciation for what they did here, Now, I have no idea what their views were back towards me, and I didn't try to convince them of anything. I just shared what this place meant to me and how much appreciation I had for the community that built the space. So it's a one-way, my experience, my unenlightened view, my interpretation of what this place and this practice means to me. And that's it. I thanked them, and they thanked me for saving the building and leaving the cross up. And I left it at that. So, yeah.
You talk about having good thoughts about other people, and there is a lot about compassion. How do you develop compassion for truly disagreeable people?
For truly what?
Disagreeable people.
Disagreeable people. Oh, that's one of my favorite questions. How do I develop compassion for truly disagreeable people? So do you mean people that truly disagree with you?
I mean, yes.
Yes. So at that same 2 o'clock class where there's the robes and the tambourines, they're asking me how those people that are truly disagreeable are asking me how to develop compassion for you. Because you are truly disagreeable to them.
I'm sure.
That's where it starts, is to understand that and truly disagreeable can be replaced for whatever words you'd like to use. I won't mention most of them, right? But that's the reality, is that we all perceive the world one way, and that way is only from our lens. And there are topics in here that, probably there's 80 people here, I bet all of us would agree on. We'd all have the same view. And then there's topics in here that we would be split down the middle, right? I know many of you in here. You all have different views. You have different perceptions of reality. You have different ways of living your lives. You have different careers. You have different educations. Don't be shocked here. It's the only time I mention the word. You also have different political views. That's the last thing I'll say about politics. We have 2 rules here. We don't talk religion, we don't talk politics. But I bring that up only to point out that don't make the mistake that just because you go to a Buddhist place, that means everybody thinks the same way. This is where it starts, is to understand that your views are only yours. And every person you encounter your entire life is going to have their views. And your question, which is how do you develop compassion for them, starts with understanding, wouldn't you want people to have compassion for you, for your views? The ignorant ones too? Yeah, that's how. You recognize that we have unenlightened views. We are attached to our views. We think our views are correct. When we're in an argument, we think we are right. And we hope people will have compassion for our ignorance, because our views are different than theirs. So if I want anyone to have compassion for me, then I need to learn to have compassion for somebody else. The second part is to understand that each person has their views only because of the way they were raised, the countries they're from, the families they're from, right? Parts of the, California they're raised in, parts of this United States they're raised in, their friends, their experiences. We all have different views based on the conditions. It's called causes and conditions. Those shape our views, right? We are not born hating people. We are not born killing people. We are not born destroying people. We are born screaming and crying, in pain and excitement, probably. And somebody holds us and we feel better. That's where every human that you think is disagreeable started. See that side of them. Begin to understand what they were raised with. And the last thing I'll say is, to me, it helps to remove this idea of blaming others for the way things are. Because we are so quick to point fingers and blame others for certain things. And yet, it's not even noon, and do you know how difficult it will be for you today to be nice to people? It's going to be really challenging. Because you're going to see a lot of those disagreeable people. And they're going to be stuck seeing you, you disagreeable people. And pray. Prayer helps, probably. Yeah. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No.
Okay.
But it's still very difficult to convince yourself.
Oh, everything I just said, I never said any of that was easy, did I? It's extremely difficult. But that's the diligence, that's the effort. Absolutely it is difficult. Because all day today, people are going to do things that you don't agree with and you don't like. And we get to thank them for being our greatest teachers. You know? Yeah. Good luck. You can report back next week.
I was wondering if you could define selflessness as you understand it. I'm kind of struggling, like, wrapping my head around, like, the absoluteness of that statement. Kind of, like, how do you conceptualize it? Because, like, there is myself that is separate from the you, but, so what is the Buddhist representation of selflessness in that regard?
Well, to clarify, are you asking about the general definition of what selflessness is, or are you asking about the Buddhist teachings about non-self? Because those are two different things.
The second.
So when the Buddha talked about non-self, what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking about.
Yes.
Okay. Because that's different from being selfless, doing
Okay.
selfless acts. When you look at this kind of very intellectual understanding of what the Buddha was talking about non-self, they kind of play together a little bit, because the first part of the question of being selfless, in some ways it is an example of non-self, but in some ways it is that self that is recognizing selflessness that actually is not the practice of non-self. So spin around that for a while.
Oh, I got it.
But I'll come back to your question. I just wanted to throw that out there for you. One of my favorite expressions in Buddhism is that the unenlightened mind cannot comprehend the enlightened teachings. So I'll talk about myself, I, as this unenlightened human being who can read about non-self, right, will use the self, the unenlightened Jeff, to try to figure out what non-self is. Impossible. Right? Non-self doesn't mean that we don't exist. It doesn't mean that we're not here. Right? It doesn't mean that nothing matters. It means that we are here. Everything matters. But I am not the center of the universe. I am not most important. And my perception of myself is absolutely incorrect. Right? So we have this idea, we have a label, we have a judgment we put on ourselves. We wake up every morning, we figure out, what socks am I going to wear? What pants am I going to wear? What shirt am I going to wear? How am I going to comb my hair? Right? Where am I going to go? What am I going to read? Who am I going to talk to? Where will I sit? Right? All of these things are expressions of your ego, yourself. Right? And then with all that being done, we sit down and to me as a practitioner, not to wake up and think, when am I going to achieve ultimate wisdom? But when am I going to recognize the greed, the anger, and the ignorance that's causing my suffering? And the less greed, less anger, less ignorance, I think that's more wisdom, right? And the one behind me is Kuan Yin Bodhisattva, Kuan Yin Avalokiteshvara, Chen Rezig, Kuan right? Kanon, all different languages, depending upon how you speak. Her name means hear of the world's cries. Kuan Yin hears all the suffering in the world and pours out compassion to heal. The Dalai Lama, they say, is the literal, Dalai Lama's name means ocean of wisdom. They say the Dalai Lama is the literal rebirth or reincarnation of the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. Again, she hears all the suffering and pours out compassion to heal, often seen holding or pouring a vase, not always, but often. Throughout Asia, she's seen as the goddess of mercy and protection, even beyond Buddhism, right? And so here we have her pouring out the vase of compassion, pouring it directly onto the emaciated Buddha who was near death, and at that moment in time needed some compassion so he could get on a path to awakening, right? So Kuan Yin pours compassion onto the emaciated Buddha, which to me pours compassion on to me as I sit here and everybody else in this space. And when we thought about what does this temple need, at the heart of it, what does this city need, what does this country need, what does this world need, it needs more compassion. So we felt that was the best representation of what Dharma Bum Temple is about, opening the heart and having compassion for all. For ourselves first, of course, and for all those disagreeable people. Yes. So this represents having compassion for disagreeable people. Yeah. And Kuan Yin sits on a lotus. Lotus flower represents our minds. Often our mind sits in the mud. That great expression we have out there, no mud, no lotus, right? The Thich Nhat Hanh calligraphy piece, that the mud, out of mud blossoms a beautiful flower, the lotus. Without the mud, you have no flower, right? And our minds are often in the mud. Without that, it could never become a beautiful mind. And with practice, with the practice of the diligence, the effort, the great practice, and the practice of wisdom, practice of compassion, we too can get our minds out of the mud. Yeah. Does that help? Yeah. It's pretty moving. Yeah, this was an 8-month process that to make them in a year-long process to have them arrive here. From a couple that wanted nothing more than these to really bless this space for another 100 years, and we'll all be gone. But they'll still be here watching over us. Yeah. Another hand, that's awesome. Yeah.
I was just wondering if there was a symbolic reason that they don't have boobs.
Why they don't? I don't know. You know, it's interesting. I will research that for you. Surely I will. And you know, the only thing I can't speak to that directly. But what I can say is often, so Buddhist iconography, which is phenomenal, there's so many different interpretations of Buddhist statues, bodhisattvas. Each culture makes them differently. And the interesting thing about the Kuan Yin is that in our culture, the one in the middle here, Kuan Yin is typically seen and represented in the female, as a female form. But ultimately, Kuan Yin is beyond gender. That Kuan Yin transcends gender. That all the Buddhist teachings and Buddhas and Bodhisattvas transcend gender. That there is this endless consciousness of wisdom and compassion that is beyond the physical form. So that part I've always learned and know, but very specifically with the Kuan Yin represented in a female form, why? Let me get back to you on that. Give me a week or longer. Yeah. So, yeah, it's a good question. I appreciate you asking. Yeah. Yes, and we'll close on that.
I
Great, then we're done.
Well, how do you know if, say, you or I or anyone really is a bodhisattva or not? If they are born into a new body with a new mind and have no idea that they're a bodhisattva.
Yeah. So basically, how does a bodhisattva know that they're a bodhisattva?
Yeah, but also, like, is it possible that they would never really know?
So a bodhisattva would never, let me say this a couple different ways, and all of them will confuse you, but maybe lead you closer to figuring out an answer for yourself. Or they might not confuse you. And I'll close with this thought. One, a little bit different than you're asking, but bodhisattva would never walk up to you and be like, yo, Bo, hi, nice to meet you, I'm a bodhisattva. Right? So there's a great expression, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Right? You're just the continuous practice. Now, ultimately, very technical Buddhist teachings, bodhisattvas would know that they're bodhisattvas. Right? They say that bodhisattvas control their rebirth, that where they're born. Again, these are technical Buddhist teachings. Right? But I think that question, the answer to that question is of no value whatsoever, truly. I think the better question, in my view, to ask is, what keeps me so far from being a bodhisattva? You know? I think that's the healthy approach. Right? And I've always believed in Buddhas and bodhisattvas since I got introduced to this practice and this path. And I think there are bodhisattvas everywhere. In Buddhism, they call them Buddhas to be, that we're all Buddhas to be. Right? You're going to get frustrated by someone today, right? Yes, look at them as a bodhisattva. They're there to teach you about your greed, your anger, your ignorance.
Even if we think they are disagreeing.
Even if we think they're disagreeable. Especially if you think they're disagreeable. You should hug them and say, thank you for being a bodhisattva. Right? Yeah. Hard for me to sit up here and really give definitions of what bodhisattvas are. You know, I know you. So, I like to look at what keeps us from being on that path. So with that, I'll close. Join palms. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to Annie's mother during her time of rebirth, and to Annie and her family and friends who suffer at this time. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace.